for deciding whether the president should be removed.
And we're live
James
again.
Madison suggested the Supreme Court of the United States
I'm gonna
as a
sketch.
completely
I just went and
nonpartisan
found a reference.
institution. Alexander Hamilton was concerned about that issue as well, but he said the Supreme Court would be inappropriate because the
would you like
judicial
to see the
branch
reference, maybe?
should not become involved directly as a branch, okay, to preside over the
I'll show it
trial,
to you after.
because ultimately an impeached president can be put on trial for crimes if he committed crimes. And Hamilton said that if he were to be put on trial, he would then be put on trial in front of the same institution, the judiciary, that had already
For some
impeached him, and
ungodly
they might
reason.
have a predisposition.
All my brushes are set
So
wrong.
in the course of the debate,
Okay.
it was finally resolved that the Senate, which it was a very different institution back at the founding. Obviously, senators were not directly elected. They were appointed by the legislature. They were supposed to serve as an
Sketch.
institution that checked on the House of Representatives, more mature, more sober, elected for longer periods of time, with an eye to the future, not so concerned about pleasing the popular masses. Remember, the framers were very concerned about democracy. Nobody ever called the United States a democracy, a republic if you can keep it, not a democracy. Very great concern about that. And then when it came time to assign it to the Senate, there was discussion about what the criteria and what the, obviously, vote should be. And the selection of a two-thirds supermajority was plainly designed to avoid partisan impeachments, plainly designed to effectuate the very wise philosophy espoused by the congressman and the senator during the Clinton campaign. That is, during the Clinton impeachment. Never, ever have an impeachment or removal that is partisan. Always demand that there be a widespread consensus, a widespread national agreement, and bipartisan support. What better way of assuring bipartisan support than requiring a two-thirds vote?
Yeah.
Because almost in every instance, in order to get a two-thirds vote, you need members of both parties. Johnson
Back to the
case was a
news.
perfect example.
Again, I'm catching
In
up
order
on
to
yesterday
get that
evening
vote,
to stuff I
you needed
missed.
not only the party that was behind the impeachment, but you needed people from the other side as well. And when 7
Because again,
Republicans
I like to just put it upon
dissented,
myself.
based, I believe, largely on the arguments of Justice Curtis and others,
Driven
arguments that I
insane.
paraphrased here the other day, it lost by merely one vote. The Clinton impeachment, if I remember correctly, achieved a 50-50
It's very
split.
odd to
Am I right
add the
about
word
that?
mere
Right about
something.
that. And it
Especially
only
something that
lost,
is
I mean,
one,
it could
merely
have been
one.
51-49. It wouldn't have been enough. And so I
One
think
vote.
it's plain that not only does the two-thirds requirement
Merely.
serve as a check on the House, but I think it sends a message to every senator. It sends a message even to those senators who would be in the one-third. Reconsider, because if you're voting for a partisan impeachment, you're violating the spirit of the two-thirds requirement. You know, there are many institutions where at the end of the day, for example, political conventions, they seek a unanimous vote just to show unity. And I would urge some senators who favor impeachment to look at the two-thirds and say, if there's not going to be a two-thirds, there shouldn't be an impeachment, and therefore we're going to vote against impeachment, even though we might think that the criteria for impeachment have been satisfied. Do not vote for impeachment. Do not vote for removal unless you think that the criteria articulated by the senator and the congressman, and I believe by the Constitution and by Hamilton, are met. Namely, bipartisan, almost universal concern by the United States of America. That criteria is not met, and the two-thirds requirement really illustrates the importance the framers gave to that criteria.
Thank you, counsel.
I've been sketching as well on my.
Mr. Chief Justice.
We just got, after
Senator from
many
Connecticut.
years of not upgrading our phone, upgraded to the 11.
Chief Justice.
So it was quite a jump
Thank you.
in capability. The screen's a little bigger, so I've been sketching on it. digitally and stuff, and it's
Ms. Chief Justice,
actually
while the,
really great.
questions
And I'm
coming
gonna
up, I
start
understand there are
recording
two more
the
Democratic
doing screen
questions and
records.
two
I don't know if
more
that'll slow it down though.
questions.
We'll see. But I've put a few of them up on my Facebook.
The
I
question
put one
from
up, I think.
Senator Murphy is to the President's counsel.
And
The House managers have committed to
there
abide
are
by
a
rulings
few
by
on
the
my
Chief
Instagram
Justice
for sure.
regarding witness testimony and the admissibility of evidence, and that they will not appeal such rulings. Will the President's counsel make the same commitment, thus
Take that line out of
obviating
there.
any concerns about an extended trial?
Actually, I'm not going to take that line out of there just yet.
Members of the Senate, we've had this question. I'm going to say it very clearly. We are not willing to do that. And we are not willing to do that because the constitutional framework upon which an impeachment is based and the constitutional privileges that are at stake.
But yeah, it's
With
good.
no
It's fun to do.
disrespect at all to the Chief Justice.
It's interesting because I can take a photo
That's
of a
not the
pencil sketch now and just
constitutional design.
directly color it
It's
on my
the same
phone.
thing they're doing again.
I mean, it's obviously
Surrender
smaller, so it takes a
constitutional
little bit
prerogatives you have,
of different maneuvering. But
and then we will proceed in this way.
made me realize iPad
Give us documents.
is the next big
Give us
spend.
witnesses, and if you don't, we're going to charge you with obstruction of Congress. In this case, it's we are willing to live according to the
Or the first big
managers
spend,
by whatever the
because
Chief Justice decides.
we got these phones on contract.
But that is not the way the constitutional framework is set up, and it's putting us in exactly the same spot again. Give up your right to challenge and subpoena in court. Rely only on the who is here, by the way, again, with no disrespect to the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice is here as the presiding officer of this proceeding. So, the President is not willing to forgo those rights and privileges that he possesses under the Constitution, under Article 2, for expediency. They tried that below in the House. We trust that will not be the decision here in the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
Thank you, counsel.
It's funny to hear them talk about expediency during an impeachment trial.
The Senator from Mississippi.
Mr. Chief Justice, I send a question to the desk
Yeah,
for
well, I should do this
Professor
though.
Dershowitz on behalf of myself and Senators
So
Nick Sally
definitely sketching
and
it too
Moran.
big. Positioning has to be very different.
Question for counsel to the President, directed to Professor Dershowitz by Senator Wicker, is this. Professor Dershowitz, you stated during your presentation that the House grounds for impeachment amount to the, quote, most dangerous precedent, end quote. What specific danger does this impeachment pose to our republic, to its citizens?
Thank you, Senators. I came of age during the period of McCarthyism. I then
That's how you're
became
gonna start?
a young professor during the divisive time of the Vietnam War. I, as all of you, lived through the division during the
Golden
Iraq
pies
War
and penny whistles.
and 9/11 and following 9/11. I have never at a more divisive time in the United States of America than today.
Really?
Families are broken up. Friends don't speak to each other. Dialogue has disappeared on university campuses. We live in extraordinarily dangerous times. I'm not suggesting that the impeachment decision by the House has brought that on us. Perhaps it's merely a symptom of a terrific problem that we have facing us and likely to face
I didn't
us
want this to look
in the
as
future.
real as it looked.
I
I
think
kind
it
of
is the
needed
responsibility of this
to caricature it
mature
out a bit more. So
Senate,
I'm gonna go
whose
back
job
in
it
and
is to look forward,
rube it up.
whose job it is to assure our future, to make sure the divisions don't grow even greater. Were a president of the United States to be removed today, it would pose existential dangers to our ability to live together as a people. The decision would not be accepted. by many Americans. Nixon's decision was accepted, easily accepted.
Was it?
I think that decisions that would have been made in other cases would be accepted. This one would not be easily accepted because it's such a divided country, such a divided time. And if the precedent is established that a president can be removed on the basis of such vague and recurring and open-ended and targeted terms as abuse of power, 40 presidents have been accused of abuse of power. I bet you all of them have. We just don't know some of the charges against some of them, but we have documentation on so many. If that criteria were to be used, this will just be the beginning of a recurring weaponization of impeachment whenever one house is controlled by one party and the presidency is controlled by another party. Now, the House managers say there are dangers of not impeaching, but those dangers can be eliminated in 8 months.
These all together.
If you really feel there's a strong case, then campaign against the president. But the danger of impeachment will last my lifetime, your lifetime, and the lifetime of our children. So I urge you respectfully, you are the guardians of our future. Follow the constraints of the Constitution. Do not allow impeachment to become a normalized weapon, in the word of one of the framers. Make sure that it's reserved only for the most extraordinary of cases like that of Richard Nixon. This case does not meet those criteria.
Thank you, counsel.
I don't know what's wrong here right now.
Oh, the senator from Arizona.
Mr. Chief Justice, I send a question to the desk for President's Counsel.
Thank you.
But it wouldn't let me draw. Okay. And we're back, I think.
The question from Senator Sinema to the President's Counsel is this. The administration notified Congress of the hold of Northern Triangle countries' funds in March 2019, announced its decision to withhold aid to Afghanistan in September 2019, and worked with Congress for months in 2018 regarding funds being withheld due to Pakistan's lack of progress meeting its counterterrorism responsibilities. In these instances, the receiving countries knew the funds were being withheld to change behavior and further publicly stated American policy. Why, when the administration withheld the Ukrainian security assistance, did it not notify Congress?
Oh, that's a video
or make
someone should
Ukraine
go
or
put
partner
together.
countries publicly
Go back
aware
through
of
the
hold
entirety of
and the
this
steps needed
impeachment
to resolve the hold.
and compilation of every burp, cough. See if it's like
Mr.
how many
Chief
hours
Justice,
worth of
Senator, thank you for the question.
or minutes. Even
I
a
think that in
minute
all
will
of
be
those
awful.
instances that were listed in the question, it was clear that withholding the aid was meant to send a signal. It was done publicly, and it was meant to
What
send
am I
a
saying?
signal.
Somebody's probably
to
already
the
doing
country.
that. Like that's probably
I
already
think that
on
in the
somebody's
testimony
board
before the House here, Ambassador
for next
Volker
week.
made clear that he and others hoped that the hold would not become
Not
public.
mine.
Because they did not want there to be any
Right.
signal to
You
the
know,
Ukrainians
just
or
get
to
you
others.
the
People have talked here,
backers.
the managers, House manager have talked about how, well, even if the aid, when it was withheld, it didn't lead to anything not being purchased over the summer. It was still dangerous because it would send a signal to the Russians. But the whole point was it wasn't public. The Ukrainians didn't know. The Russians didn't know. It wasn't being done to send a signal. It was to address concerns. The president had raised concerns, and he wanted time to have those concerns addressed. He wanted to understand better burden sharing, the issue that is reflected in the June 24th email that I referred to earlier, that's referred to in the July 25th call transcript, and he wanted to understand corruption issues.
This
He raised
eye
corruption
looks
issues.
like it's
And over the course of the summer, the testimony of
hovering a
Mr.
bit,
Morrison
but I'm
in
gonna bring it
particular below
down.
explained that there were developments on corruption over the summer. President Zelensky had just been elected in April.
just a little.
At that time, multiple witnesses testified that it was unclear. He had run on a reform agenda, but it was unclear what he would be able to accomplish because it was unclear whether or not he would secure a majority in the Ukrainian parliament. Those elections didn't occur until
I can
July.
imagine young me
That's
would
when the
be
July
very
25th
angry at
call
myself
occurred.
for
Right after
sitting
those
here
elections,
watching
he won
this.
the majority in parliament. But then the parliament
Because,
still wasn't
like,
going to actually be seated
new news.
until later in August. And Mr. Morrison testified that when he and Ambassador Bolton were
True,
in
though.
Kiev, right at the end of August, I think around August 27th, that the parliament had just been seated and Zelensky and his ministers were tired because they had been up all night. They kept the parliament up late in session, passed the reform legislation agenda right then, including things like eliminating immunity for members of the parliament from corruption prosecution, and the legislation to set up the new corruption court. And so these developments were positive developments that then Mr. Morrison testified President
You know what I need to
Zelensky, when
do?
he spoke to Vice President Pence in Warsaw, they discussed these, and President Zelensky went through the things that he was doing.
Is
And then that
entirely
information was
bring
relayed
this
back to
down.
the president. So the
I've been
whole
leaning back a little
had
too
been in
much.
place so that the president could, within the U.S. government, privately consider this
Man.
information not to send a signal to the outside world. And so
Also
this
going
plays
to
into some of the ideas that the House
try
managers
this.
have presented that somehow this was terrible, it sent a signal to the Russians. Part of the whole point, Ambassador Volker explained, was that there was a concern that it not become public because it would then not send a signal, and that is what happened until the Politico article came out on August 28th. And I think
Just
that's the
slightly
best
more
way to
bobble in it.
understand the difference in approach
Said
there.
the aim was
Thank you.
New counsel,
caricature portrait.
Mr. Chief Justice,
the senator from Indiana.
Kinda.
I sent a question to the desk on behalf of myself and Senator Braun.
Thank you.
And now I'm just gonna, before I even put in, no, actually I should put in the background layer. Just a straight gradient. Like that will do. Actually.
The senators
Did I not
from
let Poe
Indiana
back out?
asked both parties
That one
the
here?
following question. We were promised by House managers that the evidence supporting each article of impeachment would be overwhelming and uncontested. Virtually every day, House managers have insisted that the Senate cannot have
All
a
right,
trial
and I'm
without
just gonna
witnesses. Do
now
both parties
brush
agree
in
that the Senate has included in evidence in this trial
a little bit more of the
the
gray.
testimony of every single witness from which the House heard before they voted, except for the intelligence community IG report that Chairman Schiff kept secret? We begin with the House managers.
Let me take this opportunity, if I can, to answer a few questions. But first, is the fact that the testimony of the witnesses before the House sufficient to relieve the Senate of an obligation to have a trial? And the answer is no. There's no reason, and indeed every other Senate trial, impeachment trial in history, has involved witnesses who did not testify before the House. This will be the first departure. It shouldn't be, if it's to be a fair trial. I want to quickly respond to a couple other points. The question was asked, why did we charge bribery? And the answer is we could have charged bribery. In fact, we outline the facts that constitute bribery in the article. But abuse of power is the highest crime. The framers have that in mind as the highest crime. The facts we allege within that do constitute bribery. But had we charged bribery within the abuse of power article, I can assure you the counsel here would be arguing you have charged two offenses within the same article. That makes that invalid. Well, I wouldn't have had Alan Dershowitz making that argument because he says abuse of power is not impeachable. They would have Jonathan Turley here making that argument. If we split them into two separate articles, one for abuse of power and one for bribery, they would have argued you have taken one crime and made it into
All right.
two. the important
I am now
constitutional
liking
point here is not that the acts within
the overall look of
power
it.
constitute bribery, although they do. The important point is we charged a constitutional crime, the most serious crime. The founders gave the president enormous
Fade
powers,
that down into the
and
black.
their most important consideration was that the president not abuse that power. And they provided a remedy, and that remedy is impeachment. One final point. Mr. Sekulow said, that's not how the Constitution works. The Constitution doesn't allow the Chief Justice to make those decisions. But you know, he didn't say the Constitution prohibits it. The Constitution permits it, if they will agree, but they won't. And he said it's the same as in the House, and it is the same as in the House. And it's the same in this way. If they were operating in good faith, if they really wanted a fair resolution, if they weren't just shooting for delay, they would allow the Chief Justice to make these decisions. But what they do not want is they do not want you to hear John Bolton. And why? Because when you hear graphically a man say, the President of the United States told me to hold aid from our ally, to coerce foreign assistance in his election, when the American people hear that firsthand, not filtered through our statements, they will recognize impeachable conduct when they see it.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Mr. Chief Justice.
Mr. Sekulow, you have 2.5 minutes.
Gotta give it to Chief.
Thank
He
you, Mr.
puts
Chief
on a good
Justice.
show.
With regard to the last statement, I'm just going to say asked and answered. I have answered the question about the issue of moving forward if there were witnesses and our view on that. I don't have to say anything else. Now, with regard to the question that was actually presented, 29 times the House managers have used the phrase overwhelming, uncontested, sufficient. Proved, they said 31 times. Now that's just what the record says. It is true that the record from the House was accepted provisionally, subject to evidentiary objections. But they are the ones who have said overwhelmingly and proved. Now we, of course,
we
disagree
have
with their
a light
conclusions
color
as a
from
matter
the
of fact
forehead.
and as a matter of law. But for them to come up here and argue proved and overwhelmingly a total of, I guess, 64 times in a couple of days tells me a lot about what they want. What we're asking for is this proceeding to continue, and with that, we're done. Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
Thank you, Counsel. The Majority Leader is recognized.
Justice, I ask unanimous consent that the trial adjourn until 1 p.m. Thursday, tomorrow, January 30th, and this order also constitutes the adjournment.
Oh, it finally come to an
Without
end.
objection, so
All
ordered.
right, I have to leave in a few moments. I'm gonna give this another 5.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live. 24/7 streaming news source, ABC News. Imagine breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Instant, incredible access to the most compelling live video. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And
Give
imagine
the scar there a bit of a
epic
bump
live events and moments, all playing out
with
right
that same
before
shadow.
your eyes. Go there now with ABC News Live. Think of it as your live streaming adrenaline rush.
Just look at all of the smoke here.
Real, raw, live. No matter where the next step takes us, we're taking it.
And like I said, this eye over here is a lot lighter than the other, most definitely. So
Groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail. Only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive
add that in
access.
there
Take
as
you
well.
inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience
now
it
the neck.
live on the scene. Maybe that's why, in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news.
No, it's because you're the only one who actually just streams live constantly.
ABC News Live right now in
directly to
anytime.
YouTube.
Streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com. It's that easy to go there.
Like they're trying to suck up to all the other social media things where they know that 90% of their viewers are coming through the fact that it is free news on YouTube.
You here, hard work and goodwill. What you want, man?
I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Becoming a lawyer is what's getting me out.
It's gonna be a blessing, Dad, but you have to get out of here to be a part of it.
Whatever it takes, I will get myself home. For you.
ABC, Friday night, February 7th, live. The first debate after Iowa and the last debate right before New Hampshire votes. The time is now and the stakes are high. Which Democrats will take to the stage? Who will emerge and who will face this?
Now I'm going to grab just white directly and tap in the top layer of shine.
At 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific. Just days before New Hampshire votes on ABC and ABC News Live. The women in Ted Bundy's private life.
The two survivors who knew him best. Why do you think he spared you?
2020
I don't know, it doesn't look quite like the reference, but I guess that's not always going to be the point.
One of the world's most brutal dictators.
The president.
You trust him? I do trust him. Yeah, I think he trusts me and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
They're just...
One more. I'm like,
Foliage.
I know it's late, but I could not abide the President's Counsel saying foreign interference in a sense is okay if it doesn't fall into the classic definition of a campaign contribution. And the whitewash DOJ investigation somehow makes anything and everything the President's done in terms of soliciting foreign interference legitimate. That is not the policy of the United States government. That is not what Mr. Trump's own director of the CIA, director of the NSA, director of National Intelligence, director of FBI, who've all said their top priority going into 2020 is to make sure that foreign interference does not continue and is not allowed. The President's Counsel tonight, in a sense, gave a green light for that kind of behavior to continue. I hope and pray that cooler heads will prevail, but I think there was a dramatic step backwards in terms of protecting the integrity of our election, in terms of the signal sent by the President's Counsel tonight.
We've heard a lot of shock reaction from other Democrats about.
I tend to agree.
From the council. Have you heard from Republicans on the Intelligence Committee?
I have not. Listen, I cannot imagine there would be any Republican senator on the Intelligence Committee that would endorse the President's Counsel's position that foreign interference, as long as it doesn't meet Bill Barr's contribution definition under this DOJ, is totally okay. That is not our policy. It is dangerous. It is against everything that our intelligence community and our law enforcement community is working on. And again, I'm going to call on my Republican colleagues as well to reinforce that we do not want, whether it be Russia, China, Iran, Ukraine, or others interfering in our election. And we spent 3 years working on this, trying to put in place the kind of infrastructure to prevent this from happening. And I was flabbergasted by the President's Counsel's remarks tonight.
Have you spoken to Senator Burr about this?
I have not yet. I will tomorrow. But it was wrong. It was inappropriate, and it was not in the best interest of our country.
This is what being live is all about.
Again, guys.
This is ABC News Live. 24/7 streaming news source. ABC News. Imagine breaking news.
Go down here.
Live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Imagine instant, incredible access to the most compelling live video.
That's grenade.
Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling. From ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all the most innovative storytellers. All designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want. Free. And imagine celebrate epic live events and moments. All playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
Go there now.
Put this fire out right
With
now.
ABC News Live. Think of it as a live streaming adrenaline rush.
Just look at all of the smoke here.
Real, raw, live. No matter where the next step
Just
takes
at the
us,
top, add in
we're taking it.
a saturation layer.
That's what first responders were worried about.
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail. Only ABC News gets. Behind the scenes, exclusive access.
Take you inside for an extraordinary tour here at ABC News Live. This is it.
It's time to go there, be there, experience it, live on the scene. Maybe that's why, in just 1 year, ABC News Live is already America's #1 live streaming news. And imagine this, it's free. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime, streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com. It's that easy to go there. ABC News Live.
I, Aaron Wallace, am serving a life sentence for something I didn't do. But today, I've got a way to fight back. How are you here? Hard work and goodwill. What's your method?
Let's see.
Become a lawyer is what's getting me out.
So that I don't mess up the name.
But you have to get out of here to be a part of it.
Whatever it takes, I will get myself
Let's
home.
see.
For you.
Do I have it in here? Oh, did I never blow this up to full screen? That's the funniest thing. Sorry, guys. Means I'm gonna have to rerun this entirely at full screen. Okay, whatever.
My personal mission is the same. I just want to help people.
And this is what I get. Okay, the name, right? I was just gonna put in the name.
In the shadow of downtown LA, paramedics
Actually,
Scott
here's the
pumps Narcan into his latest overdose patient. The chaos of Skid Row playing out all around him. The 16-year veteran, Czar and his partner Mike Contreras, are used to mornings like this. Too often, the same person,
Here
sometimes on the
is
same day.
the image.
Hey Scott, you tended to him yesterday. What was yesterday? Same thing. Overdose? Deja vu? Yeah.
There are nearly 500,000 homeless people nationwide, many of the unsheltered living here in California.
Look at Los Angeles with the tents and the
Alright, thanks for watching.
This issue is a crisis.
Like, subscribe, share. I am not an associate of ABC News. Alright, no matter what they tell you.